German tank crews thought they understood every threat the Americans could throw at them. Shermans? Slow, easy to burn, easy to penetrate. Tank destroyers? Loud, clumsy, under-armored. Nothing that could truly challenge a Panther or a Tiger where it mattered most. Speed, maneuverability, and long-range lethality. But then something strange began happening on the Western Front. German patrols reported shadows moving faster than motorcycles. Recon units saw dust trails streaking across distant ridgelines at speeds no track vehicle could possibly reach. Some Panther crews swore they saw an American vehicle appear and vanish before they could even rotate their turret. Others claimed the Americans had built a tank that could teleport. One shaken radio operator described it as a demon of steel racing across the fields. Commanders dismissed these reports as battlefield nerves. But they were wrong. Very wrong. Because the Americans had built a machine the Germans never expected, a machine that broke every rule of armored warfare, a machine so fast it could outrun, outflank, and outmaneuver anything Germany fielded. A machine that didn't just fight tanks. It hunted them. And its top speed wasn't 30 miles per hour or 40 mph. It was 55 miles per hour. Before we dive deep into this unbelievable true story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss the ending of this story. And trust me, the twist in the final part will leave you speechless. On September 16, 1944, the morning fog still clung to the rolling fields outside the town of Arracourt, France, curling around the trees like pale smoke. A chill wind swept over the hills, carried with it the distant rumble of engines. German engines, heavy, throaty, unmistakable. The 11th Panzer Division was on the move, its Panthers advancing toward positions held by elements of the U.S. 4th Armored Division. Inside Panther 217, a steel giant cutting across wet grass, Commander Oberfeldwebel Marcus Rittner scanned the terrain through his cupola. He trusted the Panther. It was fast enough for a tank, deadly at long range, and armored like a fortress. He had survived Kursk, Kharkov, and the retreat through Poland. He knew American armor well, and he respected it. But he did not fear it. Shermans were dangerous in numbers, but predictable. M10 tank destroyers were thin-skinned and slow to traverse. Nothing the Americans had could match a Panther's firepower and armor head-on. This morning, as his column advanced through the fog, Rittner felt confident until something moved on the right flank. It was only for a second, a blur in the mist, a flicker of shadow. Too fast, too low, too quiet. Rittner blinked, unsure whether he had imagined it. He lifted his binoculars, scanning the tree line. Nothing. The Panther continued forward. Then he heard it, distant, faint, but unmistakable, the sharp thud of a 76mm gun. A second later, a Panther II vehicles ahead erupted in flame. The fireball shot upward, engulfing the sky in black smoke. Shouts filled the radio channels. Enemy armor? Where did it come from? I didn't see anything. Rittner slammed his fist against the turret ring. Turret right. Find the firing position. His gunner, Underoffizier Schiller, rotated the turret, but the fog made everything uncertain, mere shapes in the gray. Then Rittner saw it again. A shadow, low, sleek, moving like an animal across the ridgeline. For a moment his mind rejected what he was seeing. Tanks didn't move like that. Tanks didn't glide across ground. Tanks didn't sprint. And this thing wasn't sprinting. It was flying, fast, too fast. It was War Das. Schiller whispered. What was that? Before Rittner could answer, the shadow vanished behind a line of hedges. Then, almost instantly, it reappeared on their left flank. Impossible, Rittner muttered. No track vehicle can move that quickly. A second blast rang out. Another Panther behind them burst into flames. Panic spread. Turrets spun wildly. Machine guns chattered at shadows. Then the fog thinned, and Rittner saw it clearly. A small American tank destroyer with a long 76mm gun, a turret blazing, tearing across open terrain at a speed that defied everything he knew about track vehicles. Its hull was angled like a racer, its turret squat and predatory. Dirt flew from its tracks like spray from a speedboat. For a moment, Rittner felt as though he were watching not a machine, but a wild animal charging across the field. He could barely believe his eyes. It was coming straight at them. "Identify," Schiller shouted, and Rittner whispered the word like a man seeing a ghost. "Hellcat." The M18 Hellcat, a vehicle so fast that many German tankers believed early reports were exaggerations or outright fabrications. A vehicle the Germans had never faced in large numbers. A vehicle that moved like nothing else on the battlefield. It was doing almost 50 miles per hour on open ground. Target approaching fast. Schiller shouted. Rittner yelled, "Traverse! Traverse!" Faster. But the Panther's turret, heavy and gear-driven, turned slowly, far too slowly, compared to the Hellcat's blistering approach. The American vehicle streaked toward them, then suddenly swung left, drifting nearly sideways like a racing car cutting a turn. Dirt sprayed out behind it in a wide arc. Schiller cursed. "I can't get the gun on him. He's too fast." The Hellcat didn't try to engage the Panther directly. Instead, it dove behind a small hill, vanished for 2 seconds, and reappeared on the Panzer Division's rear flank, as if it had teleported across the battlefield. In Rittner's headset, chaos erupted. "They're everywhere. I can't track them. One just passed behind us at full speed. It's impossible. Nothing can move that fast." Rittner felt sweat trickle down his back. What kind of tank destroyer was this? What kind of engine did it have? How could a tracked vehicle outrun cars, trucks, even some motorcycles? The Hellcat darted between plumes of smoke and stunned German armor like a lightning bolt, firing, relocating, firing again. Its 76mm gun knocked out a third German tank. Then it reversed direction, rocketing away so quickly that the Panther crews could barely see it move. Rittner finally managed to get the Panther's turret facing the right direction, but when he looked through his sight, the Hellcat was already gone, not retreating. Gone, like it had vanished into the air. He slammed his fist again. How can the Americans have something this fast? He didn't know, none of them knew, that the Hellcat's power plant was unlike anything Germany had fielded in the war. He didn't know that it used cutting-edge suspension systems and an engine so light and powerful it broke the engineering rules of armored warfare. He didn't know that its designers had built it intentionally to be the fastest armored vehicle in World War II. He didn't know, but he would learn soon enough, because the Hellcat wasn't even using its full speed yet. And the twist? The truth about how and why the Hellcat could reach 55 miles per hour would shock the entire German Armored Corps when they finally uncovered it. A twist I will reveal in the final part of the story. On September 17, 1944, the fog that blanketed the fields around Arracourt finally began to lift, pulling back like a veil and revealing the full devastation the previous day had carved into the German advance. Burned Panthers still smoldered in shallow craters, their steel hulls warped by explosions. Trails of blackened grass traced a violent path of shells and ricochets. The air reeked of scorched metal and oil. But to the men of the 11th Panzer Division, something else lingered in the air, something far more unsettling than the smell of battle. Confusion, fear, disbelief. No German tanker could explain what they had seen the previous day. A tank destroyer that moved like a ghost. A tracked vehicle that outpaced staff cars. A machine that shifted direction so sharply that its tracks barely seemed to grip the earth. A weapon that danced around Panthers like a wolf weaving through a herd of cattle. Panther Commander Oberfeldwebel Marcus Rittner had barely slept. The image of the Hellcat streaking across the ridge replayed endlessly in his mind, a blur of steel and fury that shattered everything he believed about armored warfare. He had spent years studying the fundamentals. Tanks relied on a balance of armor, firepower, and mobility. But the Americans had rejected that balance entirely and created something radical. Something absurd, something terrifying. And this morning, as the sun rose over the rolling French countryside, Rittner began to understand that yesterday's encounter had not been an isolated incident, because as he stepped out of his Panther hatch and scanned the horizon, he saw something far worse than a single Hellcat. Dozens of dust plumes. Fast, parallel, coordinated, closing rapidly. "Movement to the west," shouted a lookout. Too fast to be Sherman's. The radio crackled with nervous voices. It must be reconnaissance vehicles. No, it's too many. Motorcycles. Impossible. No motorcycle moves like that. Rittner grabbed his binoculars. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Across the distant hills, slicing through morning sunlight with frightening precision, came a line of M18 Hellcats. Not one, not two, a formation, an entire company of them, sweeping forward in an attack pattern so fast and fluid that they seemed to glide across the terrain. It looked like a cavalry charge, a charge made of steel and thunder. Rittner felt a chill grip his spine. My God, they're coming straight at us. But the charge was not reckless. It was controlled with shocking discipline. The Hellcats darted from one patch of cover to another, using orchards, hedgerows, and dips in the terrain to mask their approach. Their engines roared like angry beasts as they closed the distance with terrifying momentum. Inside Panther 217, Rittner barked orders. Prepare to engage. Gunner, stand by. Hold down positions. His gunner Schiller responded with a tense shout. Commandant, they're moving too fast. We'll have trouble tracking. Rittner clenched his teeth. Do your best. They cannot outrun a Panther shell. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Yesterday, he had watched the Hellcats move faster than any armored vehicle ever built, faster than logistics trucks, faster than half-tracks, faster than anything that weighed more than a few tons had any right to move. The Panther's turret, despite being one of the best engineered in the world, simply could not keep up with a target moving at 45, 50, even 55 miles per hour. By the time the Hellcats closed within 300 yards, the entire landscape seemed alive with motion. Some tore across the fields. Some leapt over shallow embankments. Others drifted sideways at high speed, kicking up clouds of dust as they swung into firing positions. Then, suddenly, everything paused. For one brief moment, the Hellcats seemed to slow, just enough to aim, and the world exploded. A synchronized volley of 76mm shells thundered across the valley. The first shell slammed into a German Panzer IV, ripping through its turret ring and sending it skyward in a plume of black smoke. Another hit a Panther in the rear armor, the only weak point Hellcat crews dared to approach head-on. Flames roared from its engine compartment as the crew bailed out, coughing violently. Rittner watched in shock as the Hellcats fired, reversed direction, and vanished over a nearby ridge in less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds. No German vehicle, not a Panther, not a Tiger, not even a half-track, could accelerate or pivot that quickly. Where did they go? Schiller yelled. Rittner didn't answer. He couldn't. The German Panzers fired blindly, hoping to hit shadows. And then the Hellcats reappeared, but this time behind them. Rittner spun his turret in disbelief. How? How did they get behind us so fast? The answer was something German intelligence had failed to grasp. The M18 Hellcat wasn't operating as a tank. It was operating like a mechanized strike force, a hybrid between a scout, a tank destroyer, and a high-speed raider. And it moved at speeds the Germans had never planned for. Speeds the Germans could not counter. Speeds the Germans had dismissed as impossible. The Hellcats darted through gaps in the German line, firing into rear armor as easily as shooting fish in a barrel. A Panther tried to rotate its turret to track one, but by the time Schiller shouted, "He's there!" the Hellcat was already gone. Rittner felt his heart race as he realized something terrifying. "This thing isn't just fast," he whispered. "It's hunting us." He wasn't wrong. The Hellcats had been trained specifically for this tactic. Shoot and scoot. Get in fast, fire fast, relocate fast. They didn't rely on armor. They relied on speed. They didn't engage in duels. They ambushed. They struck. They vanished. It was like fighting shadows. A Hellcat skidded to a stop on a ridge, fired a single round into a German self-propelled gun, then roared away just as the Panther gunner attempted to swing toward it. Another Hellcat zipped between two burning Panzers, spraying machine gun fire to suppress German infantry before lunging back into an orchard. The battlefield had become a deadly game of tag, except only one side had the speed to play. Panzers lumbered. Hellcats sprinted. Panzers aimed. Hellcats disappeared. Panzers burned. Hellcats relocated. Rittner watched helplessly as a Hellcat tore across the horizon in a wide arc, moving so fast that it seemed to float across the grass. Its engine roar echoed like thunder. Its crew moved with flawless coordination, adjusting their gun, calling ranges, shifting gears. He finally understood why his fellow tankers had panicked, why they had reported seeing ghosts, why they had claimed the Americans were using some kind of trick. Because to a German tanker, trained in heavy armor philosophies, the Hellcat defied logic. It was speed incarnate, a demon of motion, a blur of metal, a weapon powered by velocity instead of armor. And the Germans still had no idea why it was so fast. No one in the 11th Panzer Division knew about the radical suspension system under the Hellcat's hull. No one knew about the lightweight armor designed intentionally for mobility over protection. No one knew about the high-octane American fuel that German panzers could only dream of. No one knew about the massive aviation-grade radial engine sitting inside a tank destroyer that weighed barely half of a Panther. And worst of all, no German tanker knew the true engineering trick that allowed the Hellcat to hit 55 miles per hour, a secret that would only be revealed in the final chapter of the story. By midday, the battlefield was a graveyard of burning German armor. And as Rittner retreated with the surviving Panthers, one truth consumed him. "We are not fighting tanks," he whispered. "We are fighting something else entirely." And he had no idea how much worse the truth would become, or how shocking the real reason behind the Hellcat's speed actually was. On September 18, 1944, the aftermath of Arracourt hung over the German 11th Panzer Division like a dark cloud. Smoke still drifted from the blackened carcasses of Panthers, and Panzer IVs scattered across the fields. Mechanics worked desperately to repair what remained of the armored battalion. Command posts buzzed with frantic radio traffic, officers snapping at subordinates, staff cars racing between units. But beneath all the noise lay something deeper, heavier, and far more dangerous than any battlefield wound. Doubt, fear, a quiet, creeping panic. The German army had built its doctrines around certain certainties. Panthers dominated frontally. Tigers were unstoppable head-on. German armor could dictate engagement through discipline, precision, and range. But Arracourt had shattered those beliefs in a single day. For the first time since the early victories in France, German tankers had encountered an American vehicle that did not behave like a tank or a tank destroyer or any known machine on track suspension. The M18 Hellcat was something else entirely. Panther Commander Oberfeldwebel Marcus Rittner leaned over a table covered in maps and reconnaissance reports inside a makeshift command tent. Officers murmured about tactics, countermeasures, and engine failures, anything to avoid acknowledging the truth none of them wanted to say aloud. Rittner broke the silence. "We are not losing to their armor," he said quietly. "We are losing to their speed." Several officers glanced at him. One scoffed. Another frowned. But Rittner continued. "I saw it with my own eyes. This vehicle, this Hellcat, it outmaneuvered us faster than we could react. It moved faster than any tracked vehicle should move, faster than any of us were prepared for." A captain shook his head. "Tracks cannot survive that kind of speed. They would shred themselves. Their engines would overheat. The suspension would collapse. This is impossible." Rittner exhaled slowly. And yet it happened. The tent fell silent. For years, German tank design had focused on armor thickness, long-range guns, and frontal confrontation. They believed they could calculate every battlefield variable. They believed they could predict enemy tactics. They believed the Americans lacked the imagination or engineering skill to produce anything that rivaled German craftsmanship. But at Arracourt, imagination had trumped armor. Innovation had outpaced tradition. And a Hellcat, that light, fast, outrageous machine, embodied everything Germany never planned to fight. Outside the tent, engines rumbled as surviving Panthers prepared for another advance. Rittner climbed into Panther 217 with grim determination. He was tired, frustrated, and angry, but he was also curious. He needed to see this vehicle again. He needed to understand why the Hellcat behaved like a force of nature. The German advance pushed through fog-covered fields toward Lunéville. Rittner scanned the horizon constantly. expecting the Hellcats to appear again like ghosts racing across the grass. But the landscape remained quiet for hours. Too quiet. Then a radio transmission broke the silence. Enemy armor sighted. Fast-moving. Multiple units. Rittner's pulse quickened. Direction? Southwest. They're coming toward us. Rittner's heart skipped. They're charging us? The answer was immediate. No. Harabelfelwabul, they're circling. Rittner's jaw tightened. Circling. Before he could process it, the first Hellcat burst through the tree line on their left flank, kicking up a cloud of dust as it tore across a shallow ditch at nearly full speed. The Panther's turret jerked toward it, but the Hellcat was gone before the gun could even align. A second Hellcat appeared on the right, then vanished behind a ridge. A third darted through a wheat field, its slender silhouette barely visible through the golden stalks. A fourth leapt over an embankment, landing in a spray of dirt before disappearing behind a farmhouse. Rittner felt his stomach flip. They weren't attacking. They were probing, studying, hunting. We're being surrounded, Schiller said softly. Rittner swallowed hard. They're not tanks. They're predators. The German formation attempted to tighten into a defensive arc, but the Hellcats kept moving. Always fast, always coordinated, always unpredictable. Panther turrets groaned as they tried to track the angles. Panzer IV commanders shouted frantic orders. Machine gun crews fired wild bursts at fleeting shadows. Then the first real strike came. A Hellcat shot out from behind a collapsed barn at nearly 50 miles per hour. It fired a single 76mm round into a Panzer IV at point-blank range, the shell punching through the thin-side armor like paper. The German crew barely had time to scream before the tank burst into flames. The Hellcat swerved left, drifting across the mud as its tracks dug deep into the earth, then disappeared behind a grove of poplars. Another Hellcat blasted a smoke shell to mask its movement, then sprinted to the haze like a phantom, leaving German gunners blind and confused. A third Hellcat performed a maneuver Rittner had never imagined possible for any track vehicle. It stopped on a slope, pivoted sharply around its own axis, fired downhill, then rocketed upward across open ground, like a machine possessed. Rittner realized something horrifying. They're working in pairs, he said aloud. Schiller nodded, trembling. One fires, one flanks. They're not fighting with armor, Rittner whispered. They're fighting with momentum. And momentum. That was the one thing German tanks did not have. As the battle intensified, the Hellcats began to strike with increasing precision. They darted into blind spots, fired into rear armor, then vanished before any Panther could respond. They exploited every second of turret traverse delay. Every moment German optics lost clarity. Every gap in German formations. Every slope, every dip, every pathway across the terrain. Rittner finally understood the true nature of the threat. These vehicles are designed for this, he murmured. For speed, for ambush, for chaos. He didn't know, could not know, that the Hellcat's designers had deliberately stripped armor to the bare minimum, that they had used aircraft components and aviation principles to lighten its weight, that they had built it specifically to hit 55 miles per hour because American doctrine favored mobility over armor. But the cruelest truth was yet to come, because after an hour of relentless maneuvering, the Hellcat suddenly broke contact, all at once. They retreated into the distance, engines roaring, leaving behind a trail of smoke and burning German steel. Are they fleeing? Schiller asked. Rittner shook his head slowly. No, they're repositioning. And he was right. 10 minutes later, the Hellcats reappeared from the north, behind the German lines again. Rittner felt his blood run cold. They don't fight us, he whispered. They run the battlefield. What he didn't know, what no German tanker yet understood, was a secret design philosophy that allowed the Hellcat to move faster than any other armored vehicle of the war. A secret that would only be revealed at the end of this story. On September 20th, 1944, after 4 days of chaos around Arracourt, the German 11th Panzer Division finally halted its advance. Not because fuel was low, not because orders had changed, not even because of casualties, though those were staggering. They stopped because the battlefield itself had turned into a nightmare of blur motion, sudden explosions, and lightning-fast American vehicles that seemed to appear and vanish at will. German commanders had faced Shermans. They had faced heavy American artillery. They had even faced Allied air power in all its fury. But they had never, in all their years of war, faced a track vehicle that violated every engineering rule they believed in, the M18 Hellcat. By the time the sun rose on that grim morning, the Germans had lost nearly 30 armored vehicles in the Arracourt sector alone. Worse, they had no clear understanding of why. Their reconnaissance reports read like fever dreams, enemy armor moving faster than expected, anti-tank units relocating too quickly to track, lightning speed withdrawals and repositions cannot match maneuvering. Commanders questioned their crews, accused them of exaggeration, even blamed fog and terrain. But then the after-action interviews began. Dozens of surviving tankers, from lieutenants to crewmen, all described the same impossible fact. The Americans have a vehicle faster than our staff cars. Their tank destroyer moves like a motorbike. It outruns everything, even our armored cars. It is not possible. Something is wrong with their machine. One colonel slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "Tanks do not go 50 miles per hour. They do not." But the Hellcat did. German engineers were summoned to study the battlefield wrecks. They crawled around burned-out Panthers and shattered Panzer IVs, trying to trace shell trajectories. They recovered fragments of 76 mm rounds. They searched for signs of heavy armor or special ammunition. But all the evidence pointed back to one shocking reality. The Americans were using speed as a weapon the Germans had never prepared for. Meanwhile, inside Panther 217, Oberfeldwebel Marcus Rittner sat silently, staring at his tank's instrumentation. He had survived another day, barely, and the psychological weight of the past 72 hours pressed on him like a physical burden. His hands trembled slightly. He could feel his nerves fraying. The battlefield was changing. The rules were changing. And the Germans were not ready for this new kind of war. Later that afternoon, a captured American M18 Hellcat was brought into a secure yard outside Lunéville. German engineers, officers, and tanker crews crowded around it like archaeologists studying a creature from another world. Rittner joined them, unable to resist. He walked slowly around the vehicle, its welded hull, its thin armor, its oddly open turret, its lightweight frame. Up close, the Hellcat didn't look intimidating. It looked almost fragile. "Is this what destroyed our Panthers?" one captain scoffed. "This thin tin box?" Rittner didn't answer. He climbed onto the hull, studying the suspension arms, the wheels, the tracks. Everything felt wrong. Everything felt out of place for a tank destroyer. There was no heavy armor, no thick steel plating, no reinforced turret ring. This wasn't a tank. It was something else. A German engineer called the group over. His voice trembled with disbelief. "You must see this." He opened the engine compartment, and the German officers recoiled. Inside the Hellcat sat a massive air-cooled radial engine, round, compact, powerful, and shockingly lightweight for its output. It looked nothing like a German tank engine. It didn't resemble a Panzer engine or a Maybach or a diesel block. It looked like it belonged in an airplane. What is that?" Rittner whispered. The engineer swallowed. "A Pratt & Whitney R975. The same type used in American aircraft." Silence filled the yard. A tank destroyer with an aircraft engine. A grounded fighter plane on tracks. Rittner felt a chill creep down his spine. "That is why it moves so fast," the engineer continued. "This machine is not powered like a tank. It is powered like an aircraft. Its torque-to-weight ratio is outrageous. Its acceleration is impossible. No German engine can match this, none." Officers muttered among themselves in disbelief. "This is madness. No wonder we cannot track it. No wonder it outflanks us. This should not even be stable at high speed." The engineer nodded grimly. "And that is not all." He guided them to the underside of the Hellcat. Using a flashlight, he pointed to the suspension mounts. "This suspension is not designed for armor weight. It is designed for racing weight. Look at the spacing. Look at the distribution. It is built for agility, not protection. A lieutenant frowned. But why? Why would the Americans build a tank that sacrifices armor for speed? The answer was simple and devastating. Rittner said it aloud as the truth hit him. Because they don't fight like we do. German doctrine was built around armored duels. American doctrine was built around rapid maneuver warfare. Germany tried to face tanks head-on. America tried to flank them. Germany valued armor thickness. America valued mobility. The Hellcat was the embodiment of everything America believed about tank destroyer warfare. It was not meant to survive hits. It was meant to avoid hits entirely. It was not meant to win brute force engagements. It was meant to ambush, strike, and escape. And then came the final revelation. The secret the Germans would learn only now. Standing over the strange, alien machine, the engineer walked toward the transmission assembly. He tapped the casing. "Look here." Rittner leaned closer. "This," the engineer said, "is the real secret. The transmission and gearing ratio have been engineered not for torque, but for top speed. The entire drivetrain is built with one priority, velocity." Rittner stared in disbelief. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that this machine was intentionally built to go 55 miles per hour?" The engineer nodded. "Yes. In fact, during trials, they reached 60. A ripple of shock spread to the German officers. Some stepped back from the Hellcat as though it were alive, as though it might leap forward and tear across the yard in a burst of motion. Rittner whispered the only words that made sense. "This is not a tank destroyer. This is a missile." And that was the truth. The M18 Hellcat was not a tank in the traditional sense. It was not a defensive vehicle. It was not a frontline brawler. It was an armored projectile, a machine built for pursuit, ambush, and disruption, a machine designed to outpace every vehicle in World War II, a machine whose existence forced the Germans to rethink everything they believed about mechanized warfare. By the end of the Arracourt battles, the Germans finally understood. They had been outgunned. They had been outmaneuvered. But worst of all, they had been outpaced. The Hellcat did not just defeat German tanks. It defeated German doctrine, German tradition, German engineering philosophy. Speed had become a weapon, and the Germans had no answer for it.